Hey everyone, Duke here, and today we're talking about how to complete the new raid, Root of Nightmares. We will go over weapons, classes, mods, and go into deep detail about the mechanics for every single encounter in the raid. If you're looking for the secret chests, I also have videos on those that will be linked in the description, and if you're looking for more help learning the raid live, I do helps on my stream at twitch.tv/dukeiscool, so come on by. On the way to the first encounter is a set of 3 orbs that will be either light or dark. These will correlate to 3 secret rooms throughout the raid and tell you which orbs you need to connect in order to get a guaranteed red border at the end of the raid. I also have a guide linked to this chest in the description showing exactly where these rooms are and how to get this chest. The first encounter is Cataclysm. You can do this encounter with either 1 or 2 runners, but we're going to go over the strategy with 2 runners and 4 ad clears. Right near the raid flag will be a white orb, which will be one of the main mechanics of this encounter and of the raid. You will notice a big white aura around the orb as well, and by shooting this orb and standing in the aura, you will get the Field of Light buff for 20 seconds. You will notice that after shooting the orb, a faint white line will appear pointing you in a certain direction. With this buff, you will want to look at the orb and follow the direction that it points towards. Here you'll see a sort of mystical plant, and notice a small seed that will be shootable. By shooting this seed while next to it with the Field of Light buff, you will connect the orb to this seed, creating an orb in its place. From here, the second runner should be waiting at the first orb with the aura around it, and shoot the orb once the first seed has been shot. To help facilitate this, we made sure to call out the word shot whenever a runner shot a seed, so that the second runner would know when to go next. If your second runner shoots early, it will instead remove the seeds from being shootable at all for about 15 seconds, and will significantly impact your ability to move quickly, so really make sure to not shoot this orb early. If a runner's buff runs out before shooting the seed, your other runner can then shoot the orb again safely without removing the seeds. One tip for running in this encounter is to watch your forward runner when waiting to shoot the orb. When you hear them shoot, you can go to where they just shot first to get an eye on where the next orb is going to be based on the direction of the line coming out of that orb. After a few runs, you'll probably memorize a lot of the possible locations, but this can be a more consistent way, especially with the randomness of the ordering. There will be 4 sections of running, with each section ending when you get the message, "His hatred halts." This will give you a bit of downtime to clear some ads, as well as get some ammo and orbs without any time pressure. Note that the first orb for each new section start will be on the same side of the map that the first one started, just deeper into the arena. As we just noted, there is a time mechanic to this encounter, and this is where the ads team will come in. Ads team's first job is to find the 2 scions that spawn in, and punch them both to kill them. This will spawn in 2 important enemies, a Tormentor and a Barrier Champion. If you look at the row of buildings in the middle of the room as kind of the center of the arena, one of these will always spawn on the left side, and one of them will spawn on the right side of the set of buildings. Your first goal should be to locate and defeat the Tormentor. From the start of the encounter, you will have 35 seconds for the running team to finish their section, or it will be a wipe. However, by killing a Tormentor, you will get an additional 35 seconds added to the timer. After this, you'll want to defeat the Barrier Champion as well, as this will spawn in 2 more Scions, and once those are punched, spawn in another Tormentor and Barrier Champion. Basically, the faster that you kill these important enemies, the more time you can give to your running team. Note that of course there will be huge amounts of other ads as well, and you will want to keep these down as much as possible for survival reasons. Other than that, your job will remain the same throughout the encounter, and just like the running team will be pushing further and further into the arena after each section has been completed. I liked using the buildings I mentioned in the middle to have a bird's eye view of the arena as much as possible, giving me clear sightlines as well as an easy way to see the Scions, Tormentors, and Barrier Champions. Loadouts are pretty flexible here, especially subclass-wise, but a few burst supers can be helpful in a pinch to quickly kill a Tormentor if and when you need more time. Void LMGs are just insanely nutty this season and highly recommended, especially when paired with Volatile Flow and Bricks from Beyond in the artifact. And don't forget to bring Barrier, with Arbalist being a very solid option. After completing the final round, the remaining ads will despawn after a few seconds, and you will have completed Encounter 1. The second encounter is Scission. This encounter is going to use the same orb mechanic from the first encounter, but now there will be 2 separate orbs, the Light Orb and the Dark Orb. These will be on separate sides of the huge gap in the middle of the map. You'll want to split up your team 3 and 3 with 1 runner for both sides. Start the encounter with all 3 members on your side inside the aura of your orb, and shoot the orb to get the buffs. The light buff is once again the Field of Light buff, while the dark buff is called Flux of Darkness. Again, you will have this buff for 20 seconds, or until you shoot the correct seed to connect the orb to the seed. This buff will also allow you to kill the otherwise immune enemies on your side that will spawn in each time you use the orb to grab a buff, which is why you will always want everyone to grab the buff rather than just your current seed shooter. The first seed for both sides will be on the opposite side of the map, so you will need to use the push cannons to get across to the other side. These are extremely finicky, but I found that taking your time to make sure your back is pushed against it and directly in the center as much as possible made them more consistent. Shoot the little node in front of you once you're in position to get yeeted to the other side. Once here, find the seed that your orb was pointed to and shoot it once next to it, just like in the first encounter. Once you've done this, call out to your team that you've shot your seed, and the 2 members left on the original side should immediately go back and reacquire their respective buff. Just like in the first encounter, make sure to not do this early, as it will deactivate the seed for your runner if done before they shoot. The second seed for each team will be pretty much straight in front of where the first orb starts, and have one member of this team of 2 run forward to shoot the seed, and then immediately run back to get the buff again. While this is happening, your runner should be on the way back from the opposite side, and once they are back, all 3 of you can acquire the buff for a 3rd time. At this point, your runner will go back across to get the second seed on the opposite side. Once again, call out once the seed has been shot so your 2 teammates can go reacquire the buff afterwards. Do note that this buff will have moved up to the next orb on each side at this point. Again, your next seed will be in front of you after acquiring the buff, and once your runner is back across, grab the buff for one final time and have them go across to get the final seed. Once all seeds and paths have been created on both sides, some additional enemies will spawn. These will all be immune without the buff on your side. Do note that this buff was extremely buggy for us, and it still is extremely buggy for us, and sometimes wasn't usable. We found 2 potential workarounds though. First, don't be standing in the buff until you see the aura come up around it, and then you can go in and shoot it to take down the enemies. If this doesn't work, you can also use the old colony strat by shooting colony right next to them to damage them through the immunity. After defeating all of these enemies, a node to shoot for the push cannons will spawn right next to your buffs on both sides and allow you to get shot up to the next floor. There will be 3 total floors on this encounter, with the exact same rotations happening on each and every floor. The only 2 differences will be exactly where the seeds are to shoot, but they have the same zigzag patterns and are roughly the same distance into the encounter on each floor. Also note that whenever you're crossing for a seed, you're going to look at the far wall seeds to shoot, and whenever you're shooting a seed that's on your current side, it's always going to be nearest kind of the middle pit where all the pushers and nodes are. And the second difference, at least with the way we ran it, is that your runners will end up switching teams on floor 2. This is because that where they end up after shooting the final seed of floor 1, and instead of having them both go back across to their own sides and having to use the pushers more often, which you probably don't want to do, we just have them stay where they ended up at that point, as the jobs are really no different. Do note this means that they will end up back with their original teams on floor 3. After all 3 floors have been completed, congratulations! You've completed the second encounter and are halfway through the raid. After completing the second encounter, you'll have a small area where you complete the same node connecting mechanic. Just as before, start at the light or dark orb and follow the line to shoot the seeds. Do this until you've brought both the dark and light orbs all the way around to the center, which will then open up the next section into the jumping puzzle. The jumping puzzle is really long. Like, seriously, insanely long. It's crazy. Throughout the entire thing, there will be a timed wipe mechanic from Nezarec's charge. When his tomb fills up completely, it will emit a burst upon the entire jumping puzzle, which will kill you if you do not have a buff called Darkness's Refuge. Darkness's Refuge can be acquired by shooting a light orb to get a Field of Light buff, as you normally would, and then going into a dark orb and shooting it while you still have that Field of Light buff. This will create a safety aura of Darkness's Refuge for a limited time. If you leave this area, you will keep your Darkness's Refuge buff for 15 more seconds until it goes away. As long as you have this buff with any time remaining on it when Nezarec's kill mechanic goes off, you will be safe. I'd recommend moving through this encounter as a team, as there's definitely a few enemies around, and honestly using Strand with the grapple can be very helpful for a few of the finicky pusher boopers from the previous encounter, but Strand can allow you to pretty easily skip using these, most if not all of them. One tip I would give as well is to keep an eye on your Field of Light timer. By waiting to shoot a darkness orb until either your field of light is at 1 second, or until you need it due to an incoming Nezarec blast, you can maximize the length of your Darkness's Refuge Protection aura. Once you're through the jumping puzzle, the third true encounter is Macrocosm, aka the Planets encounter. This encounter is split up into 4 sections, with one person responsible for each platform, and the other 2 on ad clear duty. The team of 4 will additionally be split up into 2 teams, with the 2 players on the close plates being a team, and the 2 players on the far plates being the other team. To start, a bunch of enemies will spawn in near the boss platform. By defeating the 2 solar shielded Centurions, you will spawn in a mini-boss Colossus on all 4 platforms. Each person should kill the mini-boss that spawns on the platform they are responsible for, and by killing this mini-boss, you will get a buff called Planetary Insight, which will allow you to see whether each of the planets on your side are light or dark. Out of the 3 planets on your platform, you will want to find and call out the one planet that is different than the others. There's about 80,000 different ways to make the callouts for these planets, but I will show a map of our callouts on screen now. Basically, we assign each side the numbers 1 through 6, starting from the closest to the furthest from when you spawn in. Once you make the callout, collect the planet by interacting with the glowing spot beneath the planet that you just called out, and bring that planet to wherever your partner called out their planet on the opposite side. Your partner will do the exact same thing simultaneously, taking their planet and moving it to the place that you called out. Once you've done this, the planet should physically move in the play space from one side to the other. If you did all 4 correctly, you will get the message "the indexed planets reveal themselves." Do note that you do have a limited amount of time to do this, as there is a planetary shift bar that you can see that slowly goes down, and if you haven't moved the planets before that runs out, it will not work. At this point, you will need to kill the shielded Centurions again to respawn 4 more mini-bosses on each of the 4 plates. Have the same people kill these mini-bosses, but instead this time look at the 3 planets in the middle of the room. Each of these 3 planets should either be light or dark. Note that if you messed up any of the planets on the first round, you will have an additional chance here to fix any of the planets and make sure that they are all the same on each side, but this will be your last chance. And if that does happen, then the third round you will do what we're about to describe here. Here you will need to take a planet from the outside platforms to each of the plates underneath the planets that matches the color of that planet. So for example, if the planet on the left was a dark planet, you would need to take a dark planet to the left side plate. It doesn't matter which of the planets you take, as long as it's the right color. If done correctly, these planets will move to the middle and can join with the planets already there, which will then start the damage phase. Damage phase will require you to stand on a plate that has a planet above it that matches the boss's energy shield. Luckily for us, this is a predictable mechanic. The boss's shield will always start as the color that has 2 planets moved to the middle, so if there's 2 dark planets in the middle, it will be a dark shield. Using this knowledge, you can preemptively go to the correct plate and be ready for damage the second the boss becomes vulnerable. The second damage plate will always be the opposite color of the first, so you can also preemptively call out the order that you're going to want to use the plates so that everyone is on the same page. After using all 3 plates, the boss will again be immune, and you will repeat the process from the beginning. This boss also has a final stand. When hitting the final 10% or so of the health bar, or after 3 full rounds of damage, aka 9 total plates, the boss will basically go berserk, throwing fiery tornadoes at you. Standing on any of the 3 plates will allow you to do damage to the boss until it is defeated. This final stand is extremely long, actually having more time to do damage per plate than the normal DPS rounds. If your plate does run out though, just be ready to go to the next plate in order to finish defeating the boss. Do note that the order of the plates for this final stand does not matter, but make sure you all use the same plate at the same time so you don't end up burning multiple plates all at once. After defeating the third encounter, you will have another mini-room with the same light and dark node mechanic from right after the second encounter, and that same mechanic you used in each of the first 2 encounters. Proceed through here and through some small platforming to reach the final boss, Nezarec. Nezarec is the final boss of the Root of Nightmares raid. There's 2 main ways to do this encounter, either by being extremely fast and efficient, or through using the refuge mechanic from the jumping puzzle. The overall goal of the encounter is the same as encounter 2. Start from the light and dark orbs respectively, shoot the orb while in the aura to get the buff, and connect it to the next seed in order to grow the new orb. By doing all 6 of these on both sides, you will get to the damage phase. The way we've chosen to do it is by having 2 runners to start, with your first runner doing the first seed, the second runner doing the second, the first runner again doing the third, and then that second runner doing the remaining 3 seeds, which allows for those 2 other runners to transition to help both ad clear and with boss aggro. This does require precise movement and knowledge of where the seeds are, but is very consistently doable if moving quickly. Do note that after the second seed has been shot, the aura will move up 1 orb in the created path every time the next one has been shot. The alternative strategy involves the other 2 players' job, which is aggroing Nezarec. By shooting Nezarec's shoulders, you will open up his chest for a crit spot. Shooting this crit will give you Nezarec's hatred for 10 seconds, causing his attention to be on you. Not interacting with this mechanic at all means that everyone on your team will have Nezarec's hatred instead, which will basically turn the entire arena into a constant Scion boop, making everyone's job basically impossible. Also, by breaking the shoulders, Nezarec will have either an explosion of light or dark energy. This will be needed to use that refuge mechanic if you decided to use this strategy. Whatever energy he explodes with will allow you to use refuge of that type to protect you from this same white mechanic from the jumping puzzle. Bring the Flux of Darkness to a completed light orb, but not the one with the aura around it to create light's refuge, or vice versa for darkness's refuge. Either strategy you use, your stunner's job is to keep the aggro of Nezarec until both sets of seeds have been shot. After all seeds have been shot, the damage phase will begin shortly. You can DPS from anywhere in the room that you desire, but we decided to use a consistent platform on the right side of the room. Nezarec will be immune for a bit until you see a shower of light coming from the sky, denoting that he is now vulnerable. Full of Radiance, especially with Starfire Protocol, will be very helpful for safety and damage, along with other damaging supers. Do note that his slam attack can suppress your abilities if it lands, so instantly damaging supers may be more preferable. We use divinities and rockets for most of our clears, but divinity with 5 Thunderlords is almost certainly much easier, and in many cases just straight up better damage due to how high the floor of the damage will be, especially if you have the Catalyst. If he goes immune, you will want to retreat to your starting points and repeat the process from the top. Once you push him to final stand, he will go immune for a few seconds, and then once he's damageable again, go all in to finish the rest of his health before he wipes you. Once Nezarec has been defeated, you've completed the Root of Nightmares raid. Congratulations. Don't forget I will be doing helps and teaching this raid throughout the coming season on my stream, so come on by if you want to learn more. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and have a wonderful day.